Hi, my name is Kathy McKinney. It is December 14th, 2025, and this is my sensory portfolio about the anatomy and physiology of the retina and its communication in the nervous system. So kind of what I wanted to start off saying is today I'm really going to be talking about in this presentation about how the retina functions as a part of the sensory nervous system and how the retina is not just a passive surface that just detects light. It's actually a neural tissue that communicates, processes, and coordinates information before it ever reaches the brain. I'll explain how light enters the eye, how the retina converts light into electrical signals, and how those signals are then transmitted and refined through neural pathways to create what we call vision. So on this first slide, it really focuses specifically on the anatomy of the retina and how each layer contributes to the communication in the sensory nervous system. So the retina is actually not a single sheet of cells. It's a highly organized layered structure made of neurons that communicate through synapses. And then at the very back of the retina is what we call the retinal pigment epithelium, which absorbs excess light and helps support photoreceptor health. And then just in front of that layer are what we call the photoreceptors. These are more commonly known to us, but this include both rods and cones, which even if you're not taking physiology, you've probably heard of them. These cells help detect light, but they actually do not produce the action potentials. Instead, they communicate using graded changes in neurotransmitter release. Next after that is what we call the interneurons. These mainly include bipolar cells, horizontal cells, and amacrine cells. Bipolar cells act kind of as a direct relay between photoreceptors and ganglion cells. Horizontal and amacrine cells allow communication between neighboring pathways, which help refine visual signals through processes like lateral inhibition. Then the final retinal neuron that we talked about in this slide is ganglion cells. These are actually the only cells in the retina that do generate action potentials. They are axons bundled together at the optic disc to form what we call the optic nerve, which then carry visual information to the brain. Overall, this layered anatomy allows the retina to receive light, process information, and communicate efficiently with our central nervous system. So on the next slide, I wanted to talk about the retina structure and more specifically the neural layers and communication between the layers. So the retina is made up of multiple layers, as mentioned before, of neurons and is actually considered part of the central nervous system. As the light passes through these layers before reaching the photoreceptors, of course, at the back of the retina. So these photoreceptors communicate with bipolar cells, which then communicate with ganglion cells, and then horizontal and amacrine cells allow communication between neighboring pathways and helping sharpen contrast and kind of like spatial detail through what we call lateral inhibition. The fovea then contains densely packed cones that are responsible for high acuity vision. In contrast, the optic disc has no photoreceptors and it actually creates a little blind spot. But these structural differences these structural differences show us how the retina is kind of specialized for different visual tasks. Not every part of the retina does the same thing, and that is actually something that is on purpose. It was created that way for a reason. So, kind of talking about the eye as a sensory communication system, it's highly normal to consider that the eye kind of functions much like a camera. So as light enters through the adjustable opening called the pupil and is focused on the lens of the retina. Vision is the process of converting that light that's reflected from objects into actually a mental image. This happens kind of in three major steps. First, light will enter the eye and is then focused on the retina. Second, the photoreceptors in the retina then transduce the light energy into electrical signals. And then third, the neural pathways actually carry and process those signals in the brain, particularly in the thalamus and the visual cortex. This system really requires precise coordination between physical structures of the eye and neurons of the sensory nervous system to ensure that we have an accurate visual perception of what we are seeing. So the next slide I want to talk about is phototransduction, and that act of converting light to electrical signals. So phototransduction is the process in which photoreceptors convert the light into electrical signals. And rods function best in low light conditions and do not detect color. Cones, on the other hand, require bright light and allow us to see color and fine detail. But in darkness, photoreceptors are kind of slightly depolarized and will continuously release glutamate. When light then hits rhodopsin, retinal changes shape and trigger a cascade that, like, it closes sodium and calcium channels, which then causes the photoreceptor to hyperpolarize and reduce that glutamate release. This change in the neurotransmitter release is detected by the bipolar cells in our retina, and then brighter light causes a greater reduction in glutamate, allowing the nervous system to encode the new light intensity. This kind of graded communication is essential for accurate visual processing. So for slide 6, I want to talk about retinal signaling processing and coordination. So even though I've been listing off just processes after processes after processes, the retina doesn't just simply pass these signals forward, it processes them itself and sends it forward. Multiple photoreceptors converge onto bipolar cells, and multiple bipolar cells converge onto ganglion cells. This kind of reduces the amount of data sent to the brain while preserving the important features and important details we want our brain to receive. These, what we call on and off bipolar cells, respond differently to light, allowing the same stimulus to generate multiple responses. Ganglion cells have receptive fields that, with greater surrounding organization, meaning that they respond best to contrast rather than just uniform brightness. Then we have, I believe they're called magnocellular ganglion cells. These detect motion, while parvocellular cells detect fine detail in form. This division of labor kind of highlights the retina's role in coordinating complex visual information before it reaches the brain. Okay, and then on our final slide, I really want to talk about the visual pathways and just wrap it all up. So once the ganglion cells generate these action potentials, signals travel through the optic nerve to the eye optic chiasm, where information from each eye is partially crossed, if that makes sense. The signals then pass through the lateral geniculate nucleus of the thalamus, finally reaching the visual cortex in the occipital lobe. Some fibers will actually branch off to control reflexes, such as the pupillary light reflex, where light entering one eye causes both pupils to constrict. But kind of in conclusion, the retina is a very highly organized neural structure that communicates and coordinates information before it will ever reach the brain. Its role in sensory processing makes it a critical component of the nervous system and is essential for vision. And if we want to see, it's pretty important. But thank you for watching. This was my presentation on the anatomy and physiology of the retina, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.